now let's start with our first interactive panel for today. Visions for the future of AI research. AI technologies are no longer just research objects. Increasingly, robotics, knowledge-based systems, and pattern recognition are revolutionizing global research and enabling new ways of gaining knowledge across the disciplines. But AI systems are also increasingly becoming the driving force behind social and economic developments outside of the academic world, and researching and shaping them requires transdisciplinary approaches. We now want to focus on Germany and Japan in this discussion. We will talk about the political framework, conditions of AI research, and new transnational research approaches. Your questions, again, are very welcome in the chat, and we really appreciate if you take part in our live polls we will have during this panel. Who am I discussing with? Professor Dr. Hiroaki Kitano, chairman from AI Japan R&D Network, president of the Systems Biology Institute, and principal investigator at the Open Biology Unit at Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology Graduate University, and president and CEO of Sony Computer Science Laboratories. So welcome to you. Welcome also to Professor Dr. Jana Köhler. She is the director of the research area Algorithmic Business and Production at the German Research Center of Artificial Intelligence and chair of Artificial Intelligence at the Saarland University. Also a warm welcome to Professor Dr. Siawash Abejan, University professor and head of the Department Databases and Information Systems at Leibniz Universität Hannover. And I hope Dr. Michael Meister will be joining us soon. He is a German politician, member of the Bundestag, a graduate mathematician actually, and since March 2018 he has been parliamentary state secretary to the Federal Ministry of Education and research. And before we actually start our discussion with the panel, I have a question for you, my dear audience. When was the first time you interacted with a computer and thought, oh, it's smarter than me? And in which application has this been, or have you never experienced something like that? So please give us a short answer. And this is also the first questions I have for you. I'm starting with Mr. Kitano. When was for you the first time actually you thought, oh, the machine is smarter than me?
Well, that's an interesting question, actually. Well, when I actually created my own small calculator, like a digital machine, but then I think it's a compute so fast, and I thought wow, something I built myself is probably computing much better than I am. So that's actually when I was I think it's when at the age of 10 or so. So that was time really fascinated with a potential of the digital computing system.
Frau Köhler, what was the first time for you when you thought a computer might be smarter than you?
Yeah, similar to Professor Kitano. When I got my first pocket calculator at school and then started to, for example, compute square roots and do other computations, it was, of course, much more precise and faster than me. And I also thought, oh, this can actually do interesting things, and it probably can do much more than we currently think.
I have my first answers here from the audience, which is pretty interesting because I think it's very funny. Occasionally, Karl Klammer in Word, somebody said, so you remember this little, I don't know the English word actually, the little Klammer in Word services. And then somebody said also, I can't recall ever thinking that. Then someone replied, when I programmed my first opponent for a game, and someone said, not yet. Fast computation is not intelligence. So we have a huge range, I think. So Karl Klammer, but also I can't recall ever thinking that. So Mr. Siawash, Abejan, what have you experienced, or have you ever experienced such thing like, okay, the computer is smarter than me?
I was just thinking because I really never thought about it in that broad sense. But now, listening to the examples of the audience, of course, when you play against computer like against the computer in some games, you will notice it right away. When you play chess against a computer, then you think they are pretty smart.
So, Mr. Kitano, when we talk about transdisciplinary AI research, which is a huge topic here on our conference, you research AI from a systems biology perspective, but you also have been actually active in the arts and helped develop IBO. I think a lot of people know that kind of special robot, a social robot. What appeals to you about transdisciplinary work, but also what difficulties have you experienced in the process?
Yeah, I think if you try to solve like many of the major problems, which is in the real world, you will inevitably go involved in a transdisciplinary things, because like when you try to solve some of the biomedical thing, you have to know biology and medicine, and you want to apply the AI technologies, not just the AI, but you might actually do the robotics to the measurement, but then you have to understand the chemistry and then physics as well. So like in any major problem where you can't really solve this like one single discipline. So that would be, I think, the inevitable consequence. So it's not really do the transdisciplinary research because you want to, but you are forced to do that if you want to solve the problem. For example, like a RoboCup, for example, like I think like a RoboCup is huge in Germany as well. And if you have to build a soccer playing robot, AI, robotic, but of course, like if you look into the future, you might have like a more high performance agile, like artificial muscle system or soft skin surface. So it's not longer like only the robotics and AI. You have to go to the organic material. You have to the energy consumption, how you provide like power to like batteries and all that. So like if you challenge to solve the problem, which is big enough, we will inevitably go into the transdisciplinary the research.
Mm. And Ms. Kohler, your research is about the development of business business production processes. What role do transdisciplinary teams and approaches play here? So, and in your opinion, is the economy well prepared for this?
Yeah, I work on AI methods for optimization problems, and here we combine algorithms from artificial intelligence with mathematical methods, and it usually means that we need to involve application specialists, and of course we work with computer scientists and mathematicians. One example for where interdisciplinary work is very important is when we apply AI methods to other scientific fields. For example, a while ago we started to cooperate here with a professor in bioinformatics. And interestingly, the single cell behaviors can also be modeled with our methods. So processes happen in cells, and we can describe them with the same methods that we use to describe industrial optimization problems. And we also combine this with mathematical methods such as matrix factorization. And for example, we were able to explain some experimental results that the bioinformatics researchers had on some cell behaviors, and could, with the data analysis, confirm and even refine one of their hypotheses. So this led to something that they had argued for a long time, but they could never prove this. And now we were able to actually prove this. And currently we also look into data of COVID-19 corona patients, data from their brains. We know that the virus can cause some severe problems in the neurophysiological processes, and we analyze these data using, again, these methods and also other cell data. What is very interesting is that this is very beneficial for both sides. Our methods work, but for example, if we take these genetic data, they're orders of magnitude bigger than the data that we see in industrial applications. intelligence, we also need to improve our methods to be able to scale to many of these data examples. And for example, for the bioinformatics researchers, we give them new tools that they can use to analyze their data and to obtain new insights, how cell biology works and what are certain mechanisms that happen in diseases, for example.
So we now talked about research and we talked about economy, but it's not only about economy for sure, because it's about the people as well. So people have to use AI and people have to understand artificial intelligence. So Mr. Abedjan, you advocate for the topic of data literacy across the board in higher education and want students outside of computer science to learn about the basics of data science and AI methods. So why do you think it's so important to make this topic so widespread across those disciplines and bring it to the people?
Yes, so this is a very, very useful project that we started in collaboration as well with the German Informatics Society. And the idea was, since data is now all around and the AI term that we describe here is most of the time data-driven. So the question is, on the one hand, we have the researchers who are building these AI systems, and on the other side, we have society who has to somehow deal with results and with methods that are coming from these technologies. And the way we think about data literacy is that it's time for people around the world to also start understanding to deal with data, even on small scale, to understand statistical relevance, to understand what a sample size means, how specific decisions are being made. Like especially in times of Corona, you see a lot of discussions on what works, what does not work, which policy, which medication, and so forth. And being able to convey methods on a very simple level to people to understand when a statement is to be trusted or not, and how you can deal with that with a scientific method is very important. I think we are now in a time where data literacy, similar to literacy in the past, when people started learning to read, is becoming more and more important. And it's going to be much easier as well for people, for those who are creating these systems to communicate the benefits and disadvantages of those to everybody else, so that they can make decisions easier. And the project and the courses that we gave at TU Berlin were quite successful. Quite a few people from other areas such as material science and philosophy attended these courses, and they were very happy about the new methods that they learned, and new collaborations even arose from these interactions.
Thank you, and I would like to encourage you behind your screens at home to ask your questions if you have any. And I'm very happy to say that Mr. Meister has joined us. So welcome, Mr. Meister, to our little round here, to our little panel. And we already talked about the transdisciplinary exchange and yeah, for sure. I want to talk about that with you as well. So what importance do you give these two trends, internationalization on the one hand, and on the other hand, the transdisciplinarity? So what do you think? Why is it important to promote those kind of things further?
Ja, zunächst mal guten Tag.
First of all, thank you very much and good morning. It has a huge interest and a priority. Technology research is always international, and we always work international with fellow panelists. In Germany, we have research groups that are internationally staffed, and not seldom English is the only language spoken. And international conferences where you're moving around, and in international journals, articles are published. And behind this backdrop, I think that the science and research always has an international feature, and we cannot simply ignore this. On the contrary, we want to promote international cooperation wherever possible as a ministry, first and foremost in the development of technologies. Without international cooperation, we won't do. Therefore, it is important that key technologies like in the field of AI are managed and known about in order to shape our ideas. Therefore, our technology sovereignty is only possible through cooperation and even with France and Germany within the European Union are one of the pioneers. We have signed our joint declaration of intent of April 2020 between the French Ministry for Higher Education, Research and Innovation and the German Federal Ministry for Education and Research in order to promote cooperation between the German IA centers of excellence at the universities in Berlin and with the French II institutes. And this is how we plan on forming the core of a European IA network. In addition, we would like to publish a joint funding announcement in autumn where high-quality AI research collaborations between Germany and France are to be promoted. And the high number of submissions shows us that we have hit a nerve with this one in science. And you have just mentioned transdisciplinarity. And I think that AI research is now at a point where it's increasingly about application-related challenges and societal problems that have to be at the center of attention in order to explore the possibilities of AI in healthcare, in mobility, production, or services. Can be as well in climate and environmental technology, and therefore we require an intensive collaboration between various disciplines. Those fields that are managing AI, and therefore we would like to establish AI application hubs, for example, in the health sector, where the topic of transdisciplinarity can be vividly lived.
Jana Kühler mentioned was AI and the crisis, and this is what we want to talk about next, AI as a solution to the crisis. And I have a question for you again, my audience. In my opinion, the expectations for artificial intelligence to manage crises and disasters are realistic, exaggerated, or too low. So I'm very excited to see what you think. And this is also my question for all of you, Mr. Meister first. So what do you think? Are those kind of expectations exaggerated, realistic, or too low?
Also ich denke, sie sind realistisch.
Well, I think they're quite realistic. This is at least what I hope. And so we are trying to promote a realistic, painting a realistic picture of AI's capabilities of the public. Of course, there's a great deal of tension between technology enthusiasts on the one hand, and on the other hand, we have the skeptics or pessimists. And I think we have to further promote that AI, of course, cannot replace responsible human action in crisis situations, but I do think that AI can be an important tool, an important instrument in order to support us humans in overcoming crisis. When we think about modeling, where AI can make an important impact, where we can see how vulnerable our health systems are, AI is very well possible to install early warning systems that can make predictions about resource needs and can help to solve real problems, but we may not forward the problem to AI. AI is to be used as an instrument or tool for the solution.
Expectations are, or he hopes they are realistic, and 40% of you, I can see in our poll, think that this is realistic too, and around 50% think that the expectations are exaggerated, and too low, just around 9%. So I'm very excited to hear what Mr. Kitano says. What do you think about the expectations on technology and solving crisis and disaster?
I think play a significant role in solving the disaster, but at the same time, it depends on what kind of disaster we're talking about. For example, like Japan is really threatened by the earthquake, volcano eruption, all the physical things. You know, there's not much we can do with AI. We can probably predict some, but of course, the earthquake is very difficult to predict. We probably are able to have like some robotics and AI-based logistics system to actually for the disaster rescue and the recovery. high, but of course, like impact of the disaster, like a typhoon, flooding, like a earthquake in a volcano. But there's not much you can do in the information science. What you can do is like a really quick recovery. I think that's the best way. When the crisis is like a corona, like a COVID pandemic, we have a lot of like AI which we can help. Like one is to find a cure, to find like a highly high risk individual. Depends on the very early stage medical data. In addition, like I'm leading the Japanese effort for like AI project for the counter corona project, and then what we are doing is both the pipeline from the early detection to like a CT scan based diagnosis of the potential corona patient, and the risk profiling for the who may be actually the symptom of infection, and then what kind of countermeasure we're going to impose to the reduce the infection. For example, like one of the things we are doing this moment, for example, maybe I can just show the thing is the behind. For example, I don't know if you see. Okay, you see that. Yeah, this is like a simulation on the how the transmission spreading, and then pink area says like this is where you have to do the lockdown, and then depending on potential Japanese government countermeasure, you can really predict like how long we have to do the lockdown. In Japan, we can really do the very strict lockdown. We have to ask people to stay home, ask people like shops to close, but at least like we can get the data and then do the machine learning to be able to get the parameter on under what condition, what is the likely like a transmission, likely number of the increase of the infected people, and then what is the possible effect impact on the what kind against like a government countermeasure. So we are predicting that, and then actually this is directly reported to the minister and the prime minister, and then taking into account to the all the countermeasures. What we actually find that interesting is that we find relatively unusual vaccination strategy, and what we actually found out is the we get like a machine learning based parameter that half of the elderly people infected by the younger generations, the generations which are less than 50, old, and then because of that, but then if you vaccinate elderly populations only, you get actually a longer time to actually control the this pandemic. But if you, for example, vaccinate 70% elderly population, 30% younger population, you can actually control the this pandemic much faster, theoretically, because younger population actually determines really where the pandemic goes. Like how most of the transmissions go among the younger populations. You have to really control the pandemic in that populations. But if you control that, you reduce the half of the potential infection to the elderly population, which is likely to get the more severe, symptom. So I think the strategy, what we're recommending to the Japanese government is we are going for the elderly population vaccination right now, but at the same time, I think we should gradually expand, probably faster than better, to the vaccination to the younger populations in the controlling all the transmission. But this is possible because of the parameter identification by the machine learning in terms of like age layer, inter-age transmission parameter by the machine learning from the data. But at the same time, efficacy of the Pfizer-BioNTech and then also like a Moderna, which is likely to stop the transmission itself. But that is have like a different parameter for the AstraZeneca and Johnson & Johnson. So optimize for the kind of vaccines, optimize for the parameters, but then trying to hammer out the like a specific vaccine strategy. And that Japanese government thinking about like slightly adjusting the strategy, elderly only to and also like even distribution to across the nation, to the more focus on the large cities, try to expand the vaccination to the younger population sooner than planned. So we'll see how the logics work, and then there's all the political issues as well, and how Japanese government make final decisions. It's up to the politician to make a decision, but like we are providing all kind of strategic options how the vaccination strategy and lockdown strategy were to be enforced, and then then politician will make a final decisions on what will be the countermeasure or supposed to be.
So AI can be a part of the solution, but it needs political acceptance. So Jana Köhler, what is your opinion on that?
I think Professor Kitano has explained it very well. As with any technology, there are over expectations, there are incorrect expectations, and there are under expectations. So we always underestimate the long-term impact and we overestimate the short-term impact. But there are many very useful scenarios, and we've seen the data analysis to support strategy making with respect to the vaccination policy. And this is a very nice example. And I think the current situation also shows how important science is and how important it also is that we have a very open, very free foundational science that can work on a broad range of problems, because we never know if we won't need it soon. So when you think about the new vaccination technology, it was very much controversial, and people said, yeah, this is never going to be useful. And now it's the solution to the problem. And overall, for me, AI is part of computer science, and there is no doubt that nothing can be achieved anywhere without using computers. So the advancement of computer science algorithms is key to tackle all kinds of problems everywhere. But of course, we need close cooperation and collaboration with many teams. Today, research and also development are efforts of larger teams. It doesn't need huge teams, but it needs agile teams with a few smart people driving success and insights further.
So, Mr. Abidjan, what do you think? What is the role of AI technologies in crisis and disasters?
I think the examples mentioned by Professor Kitano and also like the explanations of Professor Köhler explain it quite accurately. But I also think that it's quite healthy to have this skepticism on what we can expect from technologies and generally like hype topics like AI before they are defined in a proper way so that everybody can really understand what they mean. And as a matter of fact, it's also interesting to know, like AI is not just something that exists, it also learns from experience, right? So the same way that we are facing this COVID situation, machine learning models or AI will have to learn through some phase, or they have to learn some sort of human modeling. So the expectation that some AI somehow somewhere knows what to do is of course not accurate, but through this process we can definitely make sure that it can be one component of solutions later in later crisis management situations.
Again, I want to encourage you at home to ask your questions if you have any for our AI experts. And Mr. Kitano, you mentioned it. Japan is a leader in managing crisis with technology, for example, in the pandemic, but also I know you are developing a tsunami early warning system right now in Japan. So there's a lot going on. What do you think? Is there any potential here for international cooperation on this field, and where are the common points of intersection, and where could Germany and Japan learn from each other?
Yeah, I think so. But I think but there are a lot. Natural disaster we might have like a slight difference. Like Germany, I'm not sure if there's a major earthquake threat, but we do. That's an immediate and clear and present danger for Japan. But pandemic, for example, this is not the pandemic we're going to have. We might have avian flu, we might have another corona, but even the corona, I think there will be a variant, there will be local outbreak for years to come. So I think we should have a global surveillance system, but an information exchange and a common protocol to be able to identify what kind of emerging local, variant, how quickly we can control that, and air traffic, and then also kind of readiness on the vaccinations. But thanks for the messenger RNA vaccine, I think we can really quickly design to counter with potential variant. So I think this is a time for a global surveillance. It's just just like we did for the tsunami surveillance system. So Japan deployed Pan-Pacific and Indo-Pacific tsunami early warning system, but that actually helped a lot of people's life. We can have the global scale early pandemic surveillance system and the simulation system, but backed up by like all the medical and vaccination pipelines, but not just for corona, but for like influenza and other virus as well. And of course, like potential incidents of pandemic will increase because of the climate change and decrease in biodiversity and resuming global traffic. So I think this is the one thing we can have like a common interest in, and when those things work, if things go international, I mean, it doesn't really make sense to do it in a single country, and it has to be a global thing. I think this is the place for like true collaborations that benefit like the global population.
And if we stay with this international view, are there any circumstances that make you optimistic or pessimistic when it comes to this transdisciplinary work on an international level?
I think I'm reasonably optimistic in this aspect because people face this, people experience this, and they see like a needs for like a transdisciplinarity and international collaboration at this moment. And so like, when you have like a major common threat, I think people can be united. In other aspects like climate change, I think we need to be united, but it's probably a little bit more harder because like in some places you see the threat, but another part you don't see the threat. I mean, it's a threat is there, but it's not really explicit. So it's really bit difficult for the people to imagine what the real potential threat could be. But of course, like we need to have like a specific countermeasure for the climate change or climate departure. Like we have to go aggressively on the carbon renewal, and then at the same time, not just like a carbon, but of course, biodiversity is critical issue, and then the habitat of the natural habitat reduction is another issue. That will link with the evolution in the agriculture, and that will be probably supported by the information science and the AI to do the new kind of agriculture, which might enhance the biodiversity and then robust yield at the same time. So I think there are a lot of places we can collaborate internationally. But that requires the transdisciplinarity because it's not just AI plus agriculture, AI plus environment, AI plus energy issues. So I think this is, I think we are in an era but that we have to have like a transnationality, trans-border, and transdiscipline.
But for all of those new technologies, for all of those fields in which we want to apply AI, we need the trust of the people. So, Mr. Meister, especially when we look on this pandemic right now, for sure, AI is raising hopes in mitigating the consequences of the pandemic. But again, we need the trust of the people. So how can we involve the people even better than before in AI development on the one hand, and on the other hand, to make things more understandable for people?
Also ich sehe an dieser Stelle, wenn es das Thema Vertrauen in
When we talk about trust of AI, I see two fields of action where we have to turn to. One field is AI systems have to be trustworthy themselves. That is to say that the decisions that AI systems take have to be transparent, have to be robust against possible manipulations. People, we as human beings, have to be able to check these properties and, if necessary, certify them. For example, if we think about autonomous vehicles, these are issues of basic research and technological development that we have been focusing our funding on for some time now in the Federal Ministry. And our national AI centers of excellence have been established, and they are very much dedicated to these aspects and to promote the issue of trustworthy AI systems. And then, secondly, on the other hand, I think we have to focus on information, education, and training. AI systems will be encountered in almost all areas of life in the future. And therefore, we as human beings have to think about what we can expect from those AI systems and where we have to critically question and review decisions made by AI systems. And for this, all people in Germany should be well informed about the opportunities of AI on one hand, but as well on the challenges that are associated with it. And this is a goal that we have committed ourselves to in the German government. In 2019, we organized the Year of Science on AI. And then currently, the science communication with a variety of methods, communication and dialogue formats has been put in the center of attention. And I do think that this is crucially important in order to not have this abstract buzzword buzzing around, but that people have an understanding of what AI really means and have this open debate.
I received some messages from the audience, and one I would like to share with you. AI usually learns from the past experience. So the problem of the crisis is that something unexpected, never seen, has happened. So can AI actually help here?
Yeah, I would like to make a comment. I mean, first, I don't think that we need, like everybody needs to understand it. We need to be sure that the people who develop the technology and who apply it in applications understand what they are doing and what the technology can do and what it cannot do. If you just take our everyday life, I don't understand in detail how my car works. I don't understand how certain applications work. We use a lot of things in our life where we have no idea how these things work. I don't think it's a wrong requirement that everybody needs to understand this. The responsible people who bring this out to the market need to, of course, be responsible for what the technology is doing. And we need to have a certain understanding as users, and this depends on the context on which we use the technology. So in there, I think the requirement is quite different what we need here. And sometimes I have the impression that some people pose this requirement just because they don't like the technical progress. And the other question that you asked was, can you actually repeat this exactly? I think it was about these old patterns. Yes. This, for me, is a typical mis-expectation of AI or misunderstanding of the technology. Yes, we can take historical data, we can find patterns in it, and we can use these data to solve future problems. But this is not going to work for many problems, and we see so many examples where it actually fails. For example, take the Amazon hiring software. The software perfectly brought up that Amazon's hiring processes are discriminating and in particular against women. Yeah. So and you don't want to move these patterns forward into the future. So for many applications, using machine learning technologies to extract patterns and to solve future problems is useless. And it just manifests a status quo which makes no sense.
But how about the crisis?
Can I please?
Yeah.
But can I please finish this? It makes a lot of sense to understand what is happening and what we can do better. You can use it to reflect on prior decisions. And Professor Kitano's example actually showed us the tools and the insights were used to reflect on the vaccination strategy. And he saw that it's probably time to change the strategy to be more effective. And this is how we need to use it. There are very few applications where we can take or carry on old patterns forward. For example, in language and technology. Language is rather stable. In there, learning historic patterns is valid for a certain time. For many other applications, the technology must be used completely differently. We need to extract these historic patterns and we need to see what we've done and how we can, and then we need to learn how to do it better. And this is the big chance that we have. And there AI is extremely beneficial, but I don't see enough applications using it in this way.
And since we're almost running out of time, just maybe you can make some small bullet points, Ms. Köhler, because we have already research on the pandemic and how COVID infection, for example, can be detected at an early age, or how severely ill COVID-19 patients can be treated. Are there any research projects you can point out that are really promising for you?
You mean using AI to
Yes.
work against the virus?
Yes.
Yeah, tons. Everything where we use AI-based methods to better understand the virus, the disease that it triggers, and also find medication and vaccines. I mean, this is not going to go away. And we see that the virus mutates at quite some speed, and we need to keep up with the speed. So digital transformation and acceleration is what we need. And also you can see how can we protect people today by keeping them in their home offices and minimizing contacts through digital means. Of course, we are not so happy to do this all the time, and hopefully it will also go away at one point, but this is the way how we can save life.
One last question for you, Mr. Abidjan. So you're a professor for data science, and what do you think could be a connection between data science and the crisis management?
I mean, they are inherently interleaved, right? So data science is maybe the first step for most AI systems to just deal with big data. Like, of course, I don't want to disagree with what Professor Köhler said with regard to historical data, but for many systems, we are using data, and data science is the first step to try to manage this whole process with different attributes and values that might describe a problem. Now, I want to also say that in contrast to other technologies where we might not want to understand how something works, like what the internals of a car are or the internals of a phone, what is more important to understand is when AI makes decisions. And we want to understand, it should be possible to understand why a specific AI makes a specific decision, in particular if it impacts your daily life, be it from getting a credit loan up to whether you should be treated with a specific vaccine or not. So that's, I think, the part where we need to understand what's behind this decision making, and explanation plays an important role here. I just wanted to add that to this discussion.
So thank you very much. We are unfortunately running out of time already. Thank you very much for your very interesting insights on AI, especially during this crisis. So thank you, Mr. Meister, Mr. Kitano, Ms. Köhler, and Mr. Abidjan. And we are heading straight to our first keynote.